I need to change the PowerPoint display here. This next panel is one on, it says almost in a galaxy far, far away. And with as popular as Star Wars was all over the world, a lot of these smaller countries didn't really have the means to figure out how to make official toys. So they decided to just go ahead and do whatever they thought would sell in their country, and to some pretty hilarious ends sometimes. So we're going to have our three panelists, Ron Salvatore, John Alvarez, and Joe Iglesias, are going to tell us all about those. So let's give them a big round of applause.
All right, we've covered this topic before. We covered unlicensed lines like the USA line or the Hungarian line. This time we wanted to put a new twist on it. We're going to cover some of the knockoffs, which are they're Star Wars toys, sort of. When you see them, you see the Star Wars influence, but they're not really the actual toys or figures. We're going to start off with Ron, and he's going to do all different ceramics, and then we're going to move into stuff like lava lamps and lightsabers. So without further ado, we're going to let Ron start this off.
All right, thanks. So in the 80s, one of the weird fads that was around for a while, even in the late 70s, was kind of do your own ceramics, where you could go to a craft store and maybe buy a mold or even buy a pre-molded piece of ceramic or plaster and kind of paint it up in your own way. And usually these places did them to emulate popular stuff. So Star Wars is one of the most popular things of the day, so there's lots of these unlicensed Star Wars ceramic items, which Lucasfilm really didn't authorize in any way, so they're really kind of illegal, but you still find them out there at flea markets and such. So a few years ago, I've been collecting for a while, and I hadn't really found something new to collect. I did bootlegs like John and Joe had done for a while, and that got kind of expensive, and I found that I could find these things pretty cheap, and they were pretty interesting, and there was always something new to explore. So this kind of piece of my presentation is kind of the history of these last few years of buying these really ugly and strange things. So this isn't a knockoff. This is a Roman ceramics cookie jar, one of the early Star Wars licensed items, really one of the most famous. I think it was George Lucas who had the idea that R2-D2 would make a great cookie jar. And there you see basically a bootleg of it. It's a lamp instead of a cookie jar, so there's no tasty cookies inside of this one. Those little clear things you see show light through when you light it up. It's crudely molded directly off of that cookie jar with the head kind of cocked to the side, I guess, to make him look like he's in an action pose. And that's just one example of what these things are. That's a direct mold off a licensed product. One of the more popular ones, though, is this mold, which is all over the place. And you can find these all day on eBay, at garage sales. I even saw some on the floor out here in the dealer's room. It's really, someone made this themselves, or someone sculpted it specially because it's not made off a licensed product. And this particular one, I think, is a bank. Usually you'll see them as lamps. Sometimes they'll have an actual lampshade on them. Sometimes there'll be night lights. All different sorts of decorations. Anybody who bought these things could decorate them however they choose to. That's one of the fun things about this stuff, is because it's got a personality to it. Because whoever bought it did it his or her own way. Sometimes they're even signed, which is kind of fun. Here's three different examples. The first one's got kind of a silver paint job, and the middle one is really funky, and the one on the bottom has kind of baked on crystal detail, which is really strange. Here's another R2-D2 product. This one, again, is completely unique. This is the only one I've ever seen. I think it looks like it's made out of some kit. It has kind of gears on it. It looks like it had a wooden base at one time, which was later molded into ceramic. It's a nightlight, or a lamp. And there's lots of other R2-D2 items out there, including this one, which I'm not sure if it's R2-D2. Maybe his tougher older brother, or maybe R2-D2 in a tack suit, or maybe just a really futuristic garden gnome. But definitely R2-D2 based, I would say. Other Star Wars characters, Jabba. Obviously this would be later, obviously after '83. This one broke in the mail, so I had to glue them back together. That's part of the reason it looks so terrible. It's a lamp, so you can see where the holes are in it, so the light would shine through. If it looks familiar, it might be because it reminds you of the Sigma ceramic, which was a licensed Lucasfilm product. So what I think happened is someone at one of these places, at these craft places, or who had a store where they sold these molds, wanted to make their own Jabba, so they bought the Sigma one and kind of modeled one in clay to look like it, and then made a mold off of it. It also resembles this Omni bubble bath container quite a bit. I think you can see the similarity there. Princess Leia was made into one. This is actually one of the rarer ones, I think one of the cooler ones. It's a lamp. It looks like something from a Flash Gordon cereal. I think what happened with this is that it looks like an angel figure to me, so I think maybe this store maybe had angels that you could buy to paint, and someone went and put some hair on it and maybe the collar and made it into a Princess Leia. Kind of a clever way to make some money out of your existing stock. Chewbacca, how could a line be without Chewbacca? This is a lamp, I think, although this one might actually just be a decorative piece. I don't think it has a function, but sometimes you'll see these as lamps, and you'll see the jeweled detail on his bandolier strap there. On the side, you'll see his headset, and he's sitting at a little control panel there, but to me it always suggests a DJ, so I kind of call this one DJ Chewbacca. And Chewie evidently wasn't the only Star Wars DJ, because there's a C-3PO as well that looks like he's kind of spinning records. And the C-3PO actually looks a little bit like E.T. It's a really odd sculpt, but that's a lamp. And you see he has little marbles stuck in his stomach and on his chest. Another C-3PO, this one's just a head that you stick a light in, and it's like a night light. It's pretty sophisticated. The paint job is really cool. It's really metallic looking. I think you can see that it probably derived from the, was it Don Post made these rubber masks? Not directly molded, but someone used it as a model to make this. Yoda. Yoda is one of the greatest Star Wars characters, obviously. So there's a ton of Yoda ceramics out there. This is one. It's kind of a smiling, benevolent Yoda. Angry old man Yoda. This one, he looks like he has a rolled up newspaper and he's going to smack some young whippersnapper off his front stoop. Yoda on a stump. Action pose Yoda. Shaolin Yoda. And just really, really ugly Yoda. I say ugly, but this one's kind of cool. That the sculpting has a really interesting quality. It almost looks kind of Art Nouveau or arts and crafts. It's difficult to tell what it's made out of. I think it's plaster or ceramic. I think it's clearly modeled probably on the Kenner vinyl Yoda. You see the pose is a little bit similar. The hands are lower, but it's more or less similar. On the back, it has a coin slot, so it's a bank. And there you see the bottom where you can take the coins out of it. It has a price sticker on it, so someone tried to sell it in an antique mall, and it's rather optimistically priced at $300. It's also labeled as meat, which I think that probably explains what it's made out of. Of course, you have to have Ewok ceramics. They're so cute and cuddly. These are just decorative things. I'm not sure what you'd use them for. Probably garden gnomes or something. Or target practice, yes. A much cooler one is this Ewok, which is kind of strange pose. I couldn't figure out this pose, and then it dawned on me that it's probably based on a laughing Buddha statue, which is probably another popular ceramic store thing. You know, laughing Buddhas are popular religious kind of decorative things. But if you look at his feet and his hands and the smile, I think someone just put fur on it, sculpted fur onto it, and then added ears and a cowl and made it into a wicket or an Ewok or whatever that is. This one is a giant bank. This is probably over a foot tall. It's really heavy. It's the only one I think I've ever seen. It's got 3 fingers and 3 toes on each limb, which is kind of odd. Here's the back, where you can see the coin slot. And like I said, some of these things are signed, so Mr. CV optimistically copyrighted this in '83, even though he didn't have any authorization to make this, but at least gives you some history on it. So E.T. was big in the 80s. I bet you didn't know R2-D2 could fly a flying saucer, but I guess if you can handle an X-Wing, a flying saucer is not a big deal. But I'm guessing this was also an E.T. item, or maybe just a generic sci-fi lamp, and you could swap the figure out, and it could turn into a Star Wars or whatever you wanted it to be. And the R2 is actually a separate piece, and it attaches to the moon base there. And when you light it up, the whole thing lights up like a spaceship. This is probably the most common one of these things. It's a lamp. Sometimes you see them as banks. Usually they have a lightsaber, and the lightsaber will light up when you turn it on. This one just has some cutouts on the limbs and on the chest. And it's also interesting because it's on that big base. Usually they don't have a base. Here's another Darth Vader bust. Pretty crude, but it's big. This is a really large, like about a foot tall. It's hollow. It lights up like a lamp. You don't see these too often. I think it's probably modeled on the MPC Snap Together bust, so someone probably took that as their inspiration. This is a really odd piece. This is actually not something that, this is a one-of-a-kind, an artist made this on Long Island. I think it's actually modeled up out of ceramic somehow, so it's not cast, it's actually sculpted in some kind of drying ceramic, and it's got an interesting kind of artsy quality about it, but it's very odd looking too. And this is about 1.5 feet tall and weighs about 50 pounds. It's solid, and it's painted pretty painted pretty well, I should say. On the back it's got a cape that's kind of actual cloth that's been soaked in plaster and then modeled on there so it could, you know, look like it's flowing fabric. And that's just an example of a one-of-a-kind kind of weird folk art item that's out there that you can look for stuff like this all day. And also, you know, it's not just vintage stuff that gets made like this. I bought this from some kid on eBay who made it as a school project. He said he made it before the movie even came out and he had to use a trading card to get the makeup just right. I think this is one of 2 3D items I own from the prequels. The other one's a Watto eraser that Will Grief gave me for my birthday. Mugs, what would ceramics be without mugs? This one's kind of a cute R2-D2, pretty cool details. These are the licensed mugs from Rumpf that were made in the late 70s. One of the coolest Star Wars products, most famous, and the most nicely detailed. The bootlegs aren't as nicely detailed. Again, someone probably took their inspiration from the licensed stuff and someone tried to make a nice version of their own. It looks a little bit off, but it's kind of fun to see. Just, it's kind of fun to see anyway. This one's better. I think the lines on it are pretty cool. It's got a nice flowing quality. I think you can see that it's taken from the top of the lamp we looked at earlier. So someone did dual purpose on this item and maybe modified the mold so it was just the head and then made it into a mug. And my arrow didn't come out there on the PowerPoint. And Chewie also, I think this probably looks familiar from, well, it's made sort of like the knockoff of the Rumpf mug, and it looks familiar from the Chewie we saw earlier, DJ Chewie. C-3PO, there was no C-3PO licensed mug in the early years. Did Sigma make one later? I can't remember, but this is wholly original as far as I can tell, and it's got a pretty cool handle with neat detailing on it. Painted yellow, obviously. These are 2 Star Wars, these aren't figural, but they have nice raised detail of the characters. C-3PO looks like a robot butler or something over there, which I guess he was. He's got like a collar. And there's an R2-D2. I'm not sure why they have halos, but I guess if you want to pray to your Star Wars collection, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. This is my favorite mug, one of the oddest. You can see it's kind of got figures all around it, really crudely sculpted. There's an X-Wing there. I'm not sure who in Star Wars had a beehive hairdo, maybe in the background of the cantina somewhere. And there's the Chewbacca, who looks a little bit like Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes. Darth Vader, or it could be Dark Helmet from Spaceballs. And C-3PO, who to me looks a lot like Steve Urkel. Household and miscellaneous. Kenner made a line of switcheroos, which was light switch covers. This is kind of the knockoff version of that. It's a ceramic light switch cover. It's what your mom bought you if she didn't like you instead of a switcheroo. And there's the licensed one. A clock. It's got an R2-D2 on there and 2 rockets that look like they maybe came out of the NASA space program or something on a moon. So, a really ugly wall hanging. This was just to be put on your wall as a decorative item. I don't know who would do that because it's really kind of hideous. Maybe next to your hunting trophies there. It's directly modeled off the, what is it, Ben Cooper made those masks, so it's just someone made a mold of the mask and then made these decorative wall hangings. Also in the category of wall hangings and also in the category of hideous are these set of 4 plaster figures. I say they're hideous, but they're actually pretty clever. I mean, the way they managed to get the details on a, you know, without much dimension is pretty good, and they have some charm to them. I mean, look at R2-D2's wobbly head, and, you know, Chewbacca's just odd looking. There's also a Star Wars